On that lake, with the bobber wobbling like a heartbeat, I decided I wasn't going to be the man who swallowed insults just to keep the peace. They call me Arthur, 62, hands nicked by decades of chalk and winter wood. A widower with a coffee-stained tackle box and a promise to keep. Michigan mornings still remember Elizabeth, my Liz, better than I do sometimes. The fog sits low, the way her shawl used to sit on her shoulders. I arranged this little reunion, me, my son Mark, and his wife Sarah, because grief makes coward of families, and I want us brave again. I paid for the boat, the gas, the bait. I even brought the thermos with that burnt toast aroma Mark used to love before craft coffee taught him to sneer. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Nice setup, Dad, he says, like I'm a curbside freebie. The word dad lands sideways his mouth, more obligation than affection. Sarah waves, small and cautious, tucked in a puffer jacket, like a note in an envelope no one wants to open. She's kind to me in the way people are kind to flags on Memorial Day, respectful from a distance. We push off from the dock, the aluminum skiff creaking like an old hymn. Loons laugh somewhere across the gray. A clean wind worries the pines. I take the stern seat, habit, and show Mark the simple cast I taught him when his feet stuck out of little red sneakers. Let the rod do the work. I say, don't muscle the whole world. He rolls his eyes. Okay, you too, Grandpa. I swallow it. It tastes like pennies. This is supposed to be the day I stitch us back together. I talk about Liz in the past tense that doesn't stab. I talk about the town parade. I talk about the high school where I used to teach history, where facts behave better than my son does. Mark talks about interest rates, about a deal he's structuring, about men he calls by last names like they're racetracks. He fishes distracted, thumbs twitching for a phone he promised to leave in the truck. Adjust your grip. I offer. You're choking the cork. Man, I got it. He snaps. You're not the only one who's handled a rod. The air cools. Sarah pretends to examine the shoreline. Her silence is a dog that won't come when called. I look down into my tackle box to keep from looking at my boy. The lid squeaks open. There's a red and white bobber Liz bought me the summer Mark got his driver's license, a tiny lucky compass she glued into the lid, and a small envelope I keep tucked under a tray like a living prayer. Not now, I tell it. Not yet. Left. I say, gentle as I can. Wind's pushing us toward the reeds. Give it a little left. Mark plants his boots. You always got to steer everything, don't you? Son, I'm steering the boat. He snorts, a sound that would embarrass him if mirrors told the truth. He snaps the rod forward, too hard, wrong angle, and the lure slaps the water like a thrown stone. It tangles. He curses the line, curses the wind, curses anything that isn't named Mark. Easy, I say. We'll work it out. We always... Don't, he says. Don't talk like some folksy podcast. You're not wise, you're just old. There it is, the shot across the bow. I feel Liz's ring, warm on the chain under my flannel, and I breathe through the sting. Age never scared me. Disrespect does. You invited us out to judge me, he says, voice rising. You think you're what, coaching me? I invited you to fish. I answer, to be a family without a referee. The skiff drifts. The motor ticks like a tired metronome. Somewhere a motorboat growls. Somewhere a child laughs on a far dock. Somewhere my temper scratches at the door. I keep it locked. Let me untangle that line. I offer, reaching slowly. Mark jerks it back. Stop telling me what to do. Sarah's eyes flick between us like she's tracking a storm on radar. Mark, she says soft. He doesn't hear her. Men on shore lift coolers. A dog barks. A gull lands and screams as if it knows the script. Look, I say, and now my voice does the thing I learned from decades of teenagers, the calm that makes noise ashamed of itself. This lake doesn't care who's right, but it will punish stupid. Hand me the rod. He leans in, jaw tight. You always act like I'm 13. I see it then more than anger. Fear wearing arrogance's jacket. Debts, maybe. Promises he can't keep. The way he fingers the empty pocket where his phone should be. I decide to be brave for both of us. I take off my cap, smoothed back what's left of my hair, and give him the look that used to mean homework now. Please? Mark, I say. Enough. He laughs, cruel and thin. You gonna make me? The skiff rocks. His shoulder squares. I catch the quick glance he throws at Sarah. The flicker of showmanship that makes men do stupid things in front of an audience. I open my mouth to ask him not to be that kind of man. That's when his hand hits my vest hard, shoving me backward, and the lake opens its black mouth. The water was a fist around my chest, cold enough to steal a man's name. For a moment, all I could hear was a rush in my ears and the muffled laughter above, thin and sharp, like nails on glass. My arms thrashed in the dark, clumsy, 62-year-old arms that once could swing an axe and paddle a canoe, now heavy as anchors. I kicked, but panic pulled me under. Come on, Dad, swim. Mark's voice cut down to the ripples, mocking, theatrical. Didn't teach that in history class, huh? I wanted to shout his name, but the lake took the words and filled my mouth with its metallic bite. I broke the surface, gasping, flailing toward the skiff that rocked like it was laughing with him. My son. The boy I carried on my shoulders to the county fair, the man I helped move into his first apartment, stood there grinning while his wife sat stiff, her hands folded in her lap, eyes averted like a churchgoer ignoring sin. The bobber I'd given him earlier floated beside me, taunting red and white, the same as the stripes on the flag that once draped my father's casket. A symbol of guidance, of steadiness, now bobbing between us like a cruel referee. I clawed forward, boots dragging me down, vest soaked through. My fingers smacked against the aluminum hull, slick and ungraspable. For a heartbeat, I saw Liz's face, not in memory, but in the water, bending and warping, her mouth shaping a warning I was too slow to hear. Mark leaned over, knuckles white on his rod. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he'd pull me up. Instead, he tapped the butt of the rod against the gunwale and smirked. You're embarrassing yourself. The laughter from a motorboat offshore carried over. A couple young guys who had no idea what theater they'd stumbled into. To them, it was a funny scene. The old man flailing, the sun cool as ice. My humiliation had an audience now, and Mark soaked in it. His chuckle was louder, his shoulders squarer, his cruelty sharper. I dragged myself along the side, found grit where none should be left, and heaved. My chest scraped metal. My body ached like brittle timber, but I rolled onto the bank of reeds nearby, coughing lake water into mud. Sarah finally moved then, just a twitch, a half rising from her seat, but she sat back down when Mark shot her a glance colder than the water I just swallowed. I lay there, lungs on fire, the sound of the loon echoing like laughter from another world. My son tilted his chin at me. Guess you should have stayed home, old man. He revved the motor, not offering a hand, not a word of help. Just left me there, a soaked wreckage of father, the kind of wreckage that drags a man's dignity down with it. And yet, in that mud, spitting and trembling, I felt something stir. Not rage. Not yet, but a clarity, the kind of silence that comes before a storm decides to arrive. My wedding band clinked against the compass Liz had glued into the tackle box lid. The compass was still there, still pointing north. She'd left me more than memories. She'd left me direction. As the skiff's motor whined into the distance, I sat up, the reeds bowed in the breeze. My teeth chattered, but inside, something steadier than heat began to burn. He thought he'd sunk me. No, he'd baptized me. And when I staggered back toward my truck, dripping lake water onto the gravel, one promise pulsed in my skull. This humiliation would be the last one my son ever delivered to me. I drove home with the heater roaring and the seatbelt digging into my shoulder, but no fire could burn out the chill Mark had left in my bones. Every mile felt like an echo chamber, his laughter bouncing against my ribs, his smirk burned into the windshield glass. By the time I reached the driveway, dusk had already folded over the town, the streetlights flickering awake like tired sentries. The house smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, Liz's touch lingering even after 4 winters without her. I dropped my soaked clothes in a heap and wrapped myself in the old plaid robe she'd sewn a patch onto the year Mark left for college. The robe used to feel like home. Tonight it felt like armor full of holes. I opened the tackle box out of habit. The way some men reach for a Bible, The hinges squealed. The little compass Liz glued inside winked at me in the lamplight. And there, under the tray of hooks and spoons, was the envelope, her handwriting still neat as press linen. I'd seen it before, told myself I wasn't ready. Tonight, I was... Arthur, it began, as if she were right there in the kitchen, reading it aloud over meatloaf. If you're holding this, it means you're searching for strength. You always gave so much of yourself to Mark, to me, to the kids at school. I want to give something back. My hands trembled. The letter unfolded like a second chance. She wrote about a savings account, hidden in her maiden name, a little treasure she built from tutoring, church donations, and the book royalties I always tease her about. $110,000. My breath caught. The number looked foreign, impossible. She ended it with, use it where your heart tells you. Use it to keep your dignity safe. I sat back, the letter shaking like a live thing. Dignity. The one word Mark had stripped bare this morning on that lake. Liz, gone 4 years, had already known what her husband would need. I pictured Mark's face when he shoved me, the casual cruelty. I pictured Sarah's silence, her refusal to even whisper my name as I drowned. My heart wanted to shout, to march to his house, slam the letter on his table, and tell him he'd forfeited every right to call himself my son. But another part of me, the teacher still left in my marrow, wanted something smarter, something permanent. I poured myself a shot of bourbon I'd been saving since Liz's wake. It burned steady down my throat. I stared at the letter beside the compass, symbols pointing in the same direction, away from humiliation toward resolve. That night I didn't sleep. I walked the hall, passing the photographs on the walls, Mark in a baseball uniform, Liz in a sundress, me in a cap and gown handing out diplomas. The images mocked me with what used to be. By dawn, when the robins began their noisy council outside, my mind was clear. I would not sink into bitterness. I would not play the victim in my own life. If Mark thought he'd buried me in that lake, then he hadn't accounted for what Liz left behind, both her money and her faith. At 7 sharp, with the letter tucked safe in my jacket pocket, I reached for the phone. The screen lit my tired face in the dim kitchen. "James," I said when the line clicked. "It's Arthur. I need to see you about some legal work." And with that, I set the first stone in the road that would lead my son to a reckoning he couldn't laugh off. James met me at his downtown office, a brick building older than the interstate, with brass door handles polished by decades of desperate hands. He was younger than me by 20 years, sharp suit, sharp mind, one of those lawyers who knows the difference between a loophole and a lifeline. We'd played golf a handful of times, enough for him to know I wasn't calling for a casual chat. "Arthur," he said, leaning back in that leather chair that smelled like ambition, "what brings you in?" I slid Liz's letter across the desk. His eyes tracked each line, lips tightening not with pity, but with calculation. I like that. Pity is soft. Calculation is steel. 110 grand, he said finally. Substantial, especially if it's clean. "It's clean," I said, "and it's not for Mark." He raised an eyebrow. "Your only son? Blood doesn't excuse betrayal." The words came out steady, carved from something deeper than rage. I want it placed in a trust. Community programs. Kids who need after-school tutors. Sports gear, a safe place to go. That money should raise futures, not feed my son's debts. James steepled his fingers, weighing me. "You're sure?" I looked past him to the framed law degree, the photos of his kids in soccer uniforms. "My son pushed me into a lake yesterday. Watched me fight for air. Called it a joke. I'm sure." Silence settled heavy. James nodded once, then pulled a yellow pad from his drawer. "We can create an irrevocable trust. You'll be trustee until you name a successor. Mark and his wife. They get nothing." I cut in. "Not a penny. I want it ironclad." His pen scratched across the paper. "We'll make it airtight." For the first time since that day on the lake, I exhaled without shaking. The humiliation was still there, raw as an open wound, but now it had a bandage. A plan. "Arthur," James said, looking at me carefully, "this isn't just about money, is it?" I sipped the coffee he'd offered, bitter and black. It's about respect. You can't buy it, but you can damn well defend it. He nodded, like a man who understood the language of fathers. When I walked out into the late afternoon sun, the courthouse clock was striking 4. Shoppers passed with bags. Kids on skateboards clattered over the sidewalk. Life humming as if nothing had shifted. But something had. The compass was left me pointed north, and now so did I. And in the shadow of that brick building, I whispered to the empty air, "Mark, you wanted to see me drown. Instead, you're about to watch me rise." Mark showed up at my porch 3 nights later, headlights cutting across the lawn like search beams. I'd been whittling by the window, knife steady, shaving curls of cedar into a neat pile. When his truck door slammed, I knew this wasn't a visit born of affection. He didn't knock. He barged in like the house was still his childhood castle. Sarah trailed behind, arms crossed tight, face pale in the porch light. "Dad," Mark said, voice low but tense. "We need to talk." I set the knife down slow, the cedar curls still warm in my palm. "About what?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "About the other day. I got carried away. Things got out of hand." "That's what you call trying to drown a man?" Sarah flinched. Mark's jaw clenched. "I didn't mean it like that. I was frustrated. You push buttons, Dad. Buttons don't throw a man into 38-degree water." The silence in the room thickened. He shifted, scratched his neck. I watched him. The same boy I once taught to tie his shoes, now a man who thought an apology was just noise you make to dodge consequences. "I said I'm sorry," he muttered, finally looking up. "So are we good?" I laughed once. Dry, brittle. "Good? Mark, you left me gasping in front of strangers. You laughed while I crawled out of the muck like an animal. You think a 2-syllable word erases that." Sarah spoke then, soft. "Arthur, he regrets it." I held up my hand. "You were there." "You said nothing. You let it happen." She dropped her gaze. Mark straightened, false confidence filling his frame. "So what, you gonna cut me off? Pretend I'm not your son." I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear hiding behind his bravado. "I don't need to pretend, Mark. You already did that for me." His cheeks flushed, a boy caught cheating on a test. He opened his mouth to spit fire, but I cut him off. "You want forgiveness? Earn it. Learn from what you've done. Until then, I don't owe you peace." For the first time, his voice cracked. "You can't just shut me out. Watch me." The screen door squealed as I opened it wide. "Leave," I said, "before you lose what little respect I still have for you." He hesitated, fury twitching in his fists. Then he stormed out, Sarah stumbling after him. The gravel crunched beneath their tires as they peeled into the night. I stood alone on the porch, the cedar curls scattered at my feet, the night air heavy with pine. For years I'd shouldered his mistakes, forgiven his arrogance, covered his debts of spirit. No more. The line had been drawn. And this time it was carved deep. The lake looked different once I moved into the cottage. Smaller, maybe, or maybe I'd just gotten bigger inside. The place was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a screen porch, wood stove that smoked more than it warmed. But it was mine, paid in full, no mortgage, no strings. Just a steady lap of water against the shore and the quiet hum of loons at dusk. I hauled boxes in the truck, each one lighter than the life I was leaving behind. Gone was the old house where every wall whispered Liz's name, where Mark's shadow still lingered like mildew. Here I could breathe. Here I could start again. On the second evening, I unpacked the tackle box and set it on the mantel. The compass caught the firelight, pointing north even when the wind rattled the windows. Beside it, I framed Liz's letter, the edges yellowing but the ink as strong as her voice. A shrine, maybe, but also a reminder my dignity had a guardian now. I filled my days the way retired teachers do, half chores, half purpose. Mornings chopping wood, afternoons volunteering at the youth center in town. I taught kids how to bait hooks, how to cast lines without snapping rods, how patience was worth more than any shiny lure. Their laughter filled the air the way Mark's used to, before he learned how to sneer. "Mr. Arthur," one boy said, freckles splashed across his cheeks like summer, "you fish better than YouTube." I laughed, the sound reel this time. Don't let the internet hear you say that. The Trust James setup started to move like gears in an engine. Equipment for after-school baseball. New books for the library. Scholarships for summer camps. Every dollar Liz saved grew arms and legs, running into futures brighter than mine. And every time a kid looked up at me with a grin full of hope, I felt a piece of that lake water wash away. But peace is never complete. Not when the past drives a truck loud enough to rattle windows. Word spread fast in town. Arthur cut Mark out. Arthur's money is going to strangers. Arthur's teaching kids who aren't his own. Folks talked at diners, whisper at the bait shop. Some clapped my back. Others shook their heads. One night, walking back from a youth center, I saw Mark's truck idling by the curb. Window down, cigarette glowing. He didn't call out, just stared as I passed. Eyes dark, jaw grinding like a man chewing broken glass. I didn't stop, didn't flinch, just walked steady, Liz's compass in my pocket, pointing me forward. Still, his stare followed me all the way home. And as the cottage door closed behind me, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first public crack came at the diner. Small-town America doesn't need a newspaper when the booze are this close and the coffee is bottomless. I'd gone in for my usual. 2 eggs, rye toast, bacon crisp enough to snap. Sat at the counter. Nodded to the waitress who knew my order better than my son ever had. Mark swaggered in 10 minutes later. Sarah trailing behind like a shadow stitched to his heels. He saw me and smirked. The kind of grin a man wears when he thinks the whole room belongs to him. He made a point of speaking loud enough for every fork to pause midair. Funny thing, he said, sliding into a booth across from me. How some folks throw money at other people's kids when their own flesh and blood could use a little help. The room hushed. I kept my eyes on the steaming mug in front of me. Good morning, Mark. He barked a laugh. Morning? You cut me out of your life. Dad, out of your legacy. Don't good morning me like we're pals. Whispers buzz like flies. Old friends, former students, neighbors. They all watched. I set my mug down, turned to my stool, and let my voice carry clear. Legacy isn't about bloodlines, I said. It's about honor. You earn it. You don't inherit it. A few heads nodded. Mark's smirk faltered. Sarah reached for his hand, but he yanked it back. You think people respect you for this? They're laughing at you, old man, giving away what should be mine. I stood, slow, deliberate, my shoulders squared. Better the town's children than a man who laughs while his father drowns. The silence was total. The fry cook froze mid-sizzle. Someone dropped a fork. Mark's face went red, then pale, then red again. You, he started, but the word stuck. I leaned in just enough for only him and Sarah to hear. Humiliation cuts deeper when it's public, doesn't it? His jaw tightened. Sarah's eyes darted away. I paid my tab, left a tip big enough to matter, and walked out into the bright Michigan sun. The door swung shut behind me, the diner buzzing again, but this time the whispers weren't about me. They were about him. Back in my truck, I sat a moment, heart steady, not racing. The first line had been drawn on the lake. Today, in that diner, the town saw who truly deserved respect. And I knew then, humiliation would be the very tool my son once used against me. Only now it was mine to wield. The second crack opened at the town hall meeting. They were discussing budgets, playground repairs, whether the library should get new computers. I sat in the back, cap pulled low, listening. The Trust James helped me set up had already covered after-school programs, and folks were grateful. Kids wore new uniforms. Shelves held fresh books. Gratitude hums different than gossip. It's warmer, more contagious. Mark came storming in halfway through. Late as always, a storm cloud in cowboy boots. He didn't take a seat. He just stood, arms crossed, chin high, waiting until he had the room's attention. Before you waste more time, he said, voice dripping with practiced charm. I think the town deserves to know whose money you're spending. Heads turned. A few people glanced at me, then back to him. That's my father's money, he declared, pointing like a prosecutor. Every dollar he's throwing at your kids was supposed to be mine. He's robbing family to buy your applause. Gasps, murmurs. He'd expected outrage on his behalf. Instead, the mayor cleared her throat and said, "Mark, sit down. This isn't the place." But he pressed on. "No, people need to know. He betrayed his own blood. And you're all eating it up like he's some kind of hero." I stood slowly, letting the wood floor creak under my boots. "Mark," I said, calm but clear, "you don't betray blood when blood poisons itself." The room stilled. I held their eyes. One by one. That money wasn't yours. It was your mother's. She trusted me to use it with dignity. And dignity doesn't laugh while family sinks. A few people clapped before they could stop themselves. The sound was small but sharp as a hammer strike. Mark's face twisted, searching for footing. "You think this makes you noble? You're just cutting me out to play saint." I stepped closer, each word deliberate. "If you wanted my respect, son, you had only to keep me safe in a boat we shared. Instead, you shoved me into the water and watched. Respect drowned with me that day. And now the town knows it too." The applause grew, cautious but real. The mayor rapped her gavel for order, but the damage was done. Mark's shoulders sagged under the weight of eyes that no longer looked at him with trust. He stormed out, boots echoing like gunshots down the hall. Sarah followed, face pale as chalk. I sat back down, heart pounding but steady. Humiliation cuts deeper when it's earned in front of neighbors. That night, I realized my revenge wasn't violence. It was revelation. And Mark's own actions would write the story for me. The third crack came under the fluorescent lights of the bank. I'd gone in to finalize some paperwork on the trust, nodding to the teller who still remembered when Liz used to deposit her tutoring checks. The air smelled of ink and sanitizer, quiet except for the low hum of the printers. That's when the door swung wide and Mark barreled in, Sarah trailing behind him, her eyes darting like a cornered rabbit. He marched straight to manager's desk, ignoring the line, ignoring the rules. "I need access to my father's accounts," he barked, loud enough for every pen to pause mid-signature. "You've been funneling money into some charity scam, and I want my share." The manager, Mr. Carlson, a gray-haired man with patience carved deep into his wrinkles, blinked at him. "Mr. Bennett, your name isn't on any of those accounts." Mark slammed a palm against the counter. "It should be, I'm his son. Blood means more than paperwork." The room stiffened. People shifted in line, pretending not to stare. I stepped forward, steady as a man walking to the gallows. "Mark," I said, letting my voice carry, "blood doesn't entitle you to a cent respect does. And you cashed that out the day you shoved me into the lake." A ripple of murmurs spread. The teller's eyes widened. Even the security guard leaned in. Mark turned, face blotch red. "You can't say that here." "I just did," I answered, in front of everyone. Carlson cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, unless your father authorizes it, you have no claim. And judging by his words, I don't believe he intends to." Sarah tugged his sleeve. "Mark, let's just go." He yanked away, voice cracking. "You think you're some kind of hero, Dad? These people don't care about you. They're just clapping while you burn your family down." I leaned on the counter, calm as a compass at home, always pointing north. Family doesn't push fathers into water. Family pulls them out. The silence that followed was heavy, final. No applause this time, no clapping. Just the sound of truth sitting in the middle of the room, like a weight too heavy to move. Mark's chest heaved. His eyes flicked to the onlookers, and he realized they weren't with him. Not anymore. His anger had turned into spectacle, and spectacle into shame. He stormed out, Sarah stumbling after him, the glass doors slamming wide. I turned back to Carlson, who gave a small nod. "We'll proceed as planned, Mr. Bennett." Walking out into the daylight, I felt lighter, though my heart still ached. Humiliation was a slow fire. It didn't explode, it smoldered. And now the whole town had seen my son burn himself with his own matches. What he didn't know, what he couldn't yet imagine, was that the real reckoning hadn't even begun. Nights at the cottage grew quieter, but inside me the storm only gathered strength. I'd sit on the porch with a lantern hissing, bourbon in hand, listening to the water slap the rocks like a steady drumbeat. Every sound reminded me that time moves forward, whether we rise with it or drown beneath it. I thought of Liz more often now. Not just her letter, but her laugh that could fold a room, her stubborn faith in the good inside people, even the ones who didn't deserve it. She would have told me to forgive. She always leaned toward mercy. But mercy without respect is just surrender, and I'd surrendered enough to Mark already. The town started to shift in quiet ways. At the diner, folks nodded to me like they carried a secret pride. At the youth center, parents thanked me not just for the books and gear, but for showing up. And yet, each time Mark's truck prowled down Main Street, windows tinted, engines snarling, the air thickened. He was becoming the man whispered about, the son who turned on his father. One evening, James stopped by with paperwork. Crisp folders stacked like bricks. "Arthur," he said, sipping the coffee I poured him, "the trust is working. It's growing. But you need to prepare yourself. Mark's not done. He'll fight harder now that he's lost face in public." I nodded. Humiliation's a wound a proud man can't stop scratching. James leaned forward. "What do you want, Arthur?" "Beyond the money, beyond the legal walls. What's the end game?" I stared into the fire, the compass glinting on the mantel. I wanted to feel what he made me feel. Stripped, small, helpless. Only then would he understand what he threw away. James didn't argue. He just folded the folders shut and left me with a silence. That night, I dreamed of the lake again, cold, endless, swallowing. But in the dream, I didn't sink. I stood, water rising to my chest, and watched Mark flailing in the same darkness he once laughed at. I woke with my heart pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. The next day, I walked into the youth center and signed up to mentor twice a week. If Mark wanted to be the man who let his father drown, I'd be the man who taught strangers how to swim. Every lesson I gave, every dollar that went into those kids, was a brick in the wall between me and my son. Still, when the sun fell and the cottage grew dark, I couldn't shake the sense that Mark was circling, looking for the one crack he could crawl through. And I promised myself, if he came for me again, I'd be ready. This time, I wouldn't be the one gasping for air. It was a Saturday when the storm finally broke. Not the kind that rolls off the lake with thunder and green skies, but the kind that shows up in steel and fury. Mark's truck growled up my drive just as I was stacking wood. The air carried that pre-rain heaviness, thick enough to chew. He jumped out before the engine even stopped, slamming the door like it had insulted him. Sarah stayed inside, silhouette stiff in the passenger seat. Mark stomped toward me, fists already balled. "You think you've beaten me, old man?" he barked. "Think humiliating me in front of the whole damn town makes you better?" I set the log down slow, wiped my hands on my jeans. "I don't need to be better, Mark. I just need to live with myself. Can you say the same?" He sneered. "You're poisoning people against me. I can't walk into the diner without whispers. I can't get alone because they think I'm a leech. That's your doing." "No," I said, calm as the lake before dawn. "That's yours." He stepped closer, chest heaving. "You're going to fix this. You're going to sign over the trust, or so help me." I cut him off, voice sharp as the axe blade beside me. "Or you'll what? Push me again? Watch me flail for your entertainment." His face cracked, fury and shame wrestling for control. "You're twisting everything." I took a step forward, close enough to smell the smoke on his clothes. "No, son, you twisted yourself. You can't untangle that by blaming me." For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Scared, stubborn, desperate to prove himself. Then it was gone, swallowed by the man he'd chosen to become. From the truck, Sarah rolled the window down. "Mark, please," she called, voice thin. "Not like this." He ignored her. "I'll find a way," he hissed. "You can't cut me out. I'll make you pay." I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "The only thing you've earned is the world watching you fall apart." His jaw worked, teeth grinding. He wanted to swing, I could see it. But something, maybe the weight of my stare, maybe Sarah's trembling voice, held him back. He spat in the dirt, turned on his heel, and stomped back to the truck. The tires sprayed gravel as he tore down the drive. Sarah clutching the dashboard like a lifeline. I stood there, the woodpile leaning, the axe at my feet. My heart beat steady, not from fear but from resolve. Mark was unraveling, thread by thread, and soon enough, he'd have nothing left to blame but the mirror. As the first drops of rain tapped the leaves overhead, I whispered to the empty road, "Come as hard as you like, boy. I'm done sinking." And for the first time, I wondered if his collapse would destroy only him, or if it would drag Sarah down too. Rain pounded the cottage roof that night, like a drumline, steady and merciless. I sat by the wood stove, fire hissing as damp logs tried to fight back. The storm outside felt like it belonged to Mark, loud, reckless, threatening to tear down everything it touched. Sleep wouldn't come, so I walked the floorboards, each groan would keeping rhythm with my thoughts. The compass on the mantel glinted whenever lightning flashed, always pointing north, always reminding me Liz had left me more than money. She'd left me a direction. By morning the lake was swollen, the air thick with that sharp scent of wet pine. I drove into town for supplies, only to find Sarah standing alone under the awning of the hardware store, hair plastered, eyes rimmed red. She startled when she saw me, then looked down like a child caught stealing. "Arthur," she said quietly, I didn't know you'd be here." I studied her, the girl who once held my wife's hand in church pews, who'd smiled nervously at our Thanksgiving table, now looked worn thin, a thread about to snap. "Where's Mark?" I asked. She hesitated. "Out, drinking mostly, yelling at people who used to be friends. He blames you for everything." I almost laughed, but her eyes stopped me. They weren't just tired, they were frightened. "He's losing contracts," she whispered. "The bank's calling in loans. Creditors are knocking on our door. He says if you just hand over the trust, it'd fix everything." I shook my head. That money was never his. It was never meant to be his. Her lip trembled. "I know. I read Liz's letter when you showed me once. I can't keep living like this. He's not the man I married." A gust of wind rattled the awning, and for a moment we just stood there, the storm around us louder than our silence. Finally, I said, "You have a choice, Sarah. You can go down with him, or you can save yourself. But I won't be the lifeboat for either of you." Tears welled, but she nodded, a small motion like surrender. Behind us, the bell above the store door jingled. Mark emerged, eyes bloodshot, a flash jutting from his jacket pocket. He froze when he saw us talking. "What the hell's this?" he snapped. Sarah wiped her face. "Nothing, Mark. Just don't lie to me." His voice cracked like a whip, and a few townsfolk stopped to stare. I stepped between them, my voice iron. "She was telling me the truth you don't want to hear, that your life's collapsing, and you've only got yourself to thank." The crowd's eyes burned into him. Sarah shrank back. Mark's mouth opened, but no words came. He turned, shoulders rigid, and stormed down the street. The whispers rose behind him, and Sarah's tears spilled over. I handed her my handkerchief. "Storms don't last forever," I said, "but some men choose to live in them." And as she clutched the cloth like a lifeline, I knew Mark's ruin wasn't just financial. It was personal, and the world was starting to see it. Autumn came fast that year. The maples around the lake burned crimson, their reflection in the water a fiery mirror of the chaos unraveling in town. Word spread quick in a place like ours. Mark's debts mounting, his business partners vanishing, foreclosure notices whispering through his mailbox like vultures circling a carcass. I tried not to linger on it, but every errand in town shoved his downfall into my path. At the post office, I overheard Mrs. Keating mutter, "Shame what's happening to that boy. But you reap what you sow." At the barber shop, men lowered their voices when I walked in, though I caught enough to know they were tallying how far Mark had fallen. One crisp Saturday, I found myself at the farmer's market. I was buying honey from a beekeeper when the shouting started. Mark, red-eyed and staggering, stood at the center of the square. Sarah trailed behind, face hollow, trying to quiet him. "You're all taking his side," he yelled, pointing a finger at anyone who dared look his way. My own father cut me off, handed my inheritance to strangers. and you cheer him like he's some saint. The crowd shifted, embarrassed. I set down my jar of honey, stepped forward. The autumn sun hit me square, the kind of light that doesn't let shadows hide. "Mark," I said, loud enough for the market to freeze. "You keep calling it your inheritance. But an inheritance isn't earned, it's given. And you lost the right to anything from me the day you laughed while I fought for air." The hush that followed was knife-sharp. Children stilled, vendors paused mid-sale, even the dogs went quiet. Mark's face twisted, fury and shame a storm he couldn't contain. "You think you're a hero," he spat. "You've poisoned everyone against me." I stepped closer, meeting his eyes so the whole square could see. "I didn't poison anything. You did that yourself. The town's just waking up to the truth." Whispers rose, firm and undeniable. Someone clapped once, twice. Then more joined in, hesitant but sure. The sound built like rain on a tin roof, steady and unrelenting. Mark's chest heaved. He turned on Sarah, voice breaking. "You told him, didn't you? You turned on me, too." Her silence said more than words ever could. Mark shoved past us, storming out the square, the applause chasing like hounds on his heels. I stood there, the honey jar still in my hand, heart steady as a compass in my pocket. This was the third time the world had seen him strip himself bare, and each time the fabric of his pride tore wider. As the crowd returned to its rhythm, I knew something certain. My revenge was no longer private. It had become a story the town itself was telling. And Mark was a villain no one wanted to root for. But villains rarely go quietly. And deep inside, I knew his final act was still waiting to fall. Winter wrapped the lake in silence, the kind that presses against the ribs. Snow stacked on the pines, roofs sagged heavy with white, and the air bit the skin like sharpened glass. In that stillness, I found a strange peace. Chopping wood, tending the stove, walking the frozen shoreline with only the crunch of boots for company. But rumors blew cold in the wind. Mark and Sarah were behind on everything: mortgage, utilities, car payments. Foreclosure notices taped to their door like scarlet letters. Folks said they argued loud enough for neighbors to hear through the walls. Some whispered she'd packed a bag twice already, only to unpack it when guilt dragged her back. I didn't go looking for news, but small towns deliver it whether you want it or not. At the diner, voices dropped when I walked in, but I could still catch words. Ruined, angry, dangerous. And every so often, someone would clap my shoulder and mutter, "You did the right thing, Arthur." I nodded, but the truth sat heavier. Watching your own son unravel is no victory. One evening, as I split logs in the cold, headlights swept across the snow. A car crunched up my drive. Sarah's sedan, its muffler coughing like an old smoker. She stepped out, no coat, just a sweater and desperation. "Arthur," she said, breath fogging, "I can't do this anymore. He's drinking day and night. He blames me for every look people give him. He says if you just give him the money, everything will be fine." Her hands shook. I guided her inside, poured coffee, let the fire thaw her. She sat hunched, staring at the compass on the mantel. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He's not just angry. He's frightening. The way he looks at me sometimes, I don't recognize him." I clenched my jaw. Liz had seen this possibility, though she never said it aloud. That's why she'd hidden the money. She'd known Mark's weaknesses better than either of us. "Sarah," I said gently, "you owe him nothing but the truth. If he won't face it, you don't have to drown with him." Tears welled. She nodded once, as if my words broke something loose inside her. But headlights cut across the window again, brighter, harsher. A truck this time. Mark's. Sarah froze, knuckles white on the mug. The engine idled loud, exhaust puffing into the cold. Then the truck door slammed. Boots crunched on ice. I stood, steadying myself. The storm wasn't circling anymore. It was here, pounding on my doorstep. And I knew, with the certainty of a man staring down a final exam, that the reckoning I'd been walking toward all year had just arrived. The door rattled under his fist, each pound shaking the frame like thunder. Sarah shrank into the corner, eyes wide, lips trembling around words she couldn't form. I set my hand on the latch, steady as stone, and pulled it open. Mark stood there, snow clinging to his jacket, eyes bloodshot, the stink of whiskey rolling off him in waves. His fists were raw, knuckles split from something or someone he'd hit earlier. "You!" he hissed, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You turned her against me. You turned everyone against me. I didn't move. You did that yourself." He shoved past me, boots thudding on the floorboards. "This is MY house, my family, my money." His voice cracked, a man clinging to a script even he no longer believed. Sarah tried to speak. "Mark." "Shut up," he roared, spinning on her, veins bulging in his neck. "You've been whispering with him, haven't you? Plotting with my own father to watch me fall." Her hand shook around the mug, coffee sloshing onto the rug. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Silence can be its own confession. I stepped between them, my shadow splitting the room. "Enough." He laughed, sharp and broken. "Enough? You don't get to say enough. You cut me off, humiliated me in front of this whole damn town. And now you think you're the righteous one? No, old man. Tonight we finish this." He lunged at me, a clumsy, drunken swing. Years ago, I'd have faltered. Tonight, I caught his wrist midair, the crack of bone under my grip. His eyes widened, not from pain, but from realization. For the first time, he saw I wasn't drowning anymore. "Look at yourself," I said, my voice low, carrying more weight than a shout ever could. "You become the storm you wanted me to sink in." He snarled, twisting, but I shoved him back. He stumbled into the wall, pictures rattling. Liz's smile looked down on us from a frame, calm as ever, reminding me of the dignity I'd sworn to keep. Sarah finally found her voice. "Mark, stop. Please. You're destroying everything." But he wasn't listening. He never had. He lunged again, wild, desperate. This time I didn't catch him. I stepped aside. He crashed into the table, scattering cedar curls I'd carved just days before. They fluttered through the air, little shavings of patience, of years wasted. He rose, panting, fury burning holes in him. "You think you've won," he spat. I stood tall, compass glinting on the mantel, Liz's letter frame beside it. This was never about winning. It was about showing the world who you really are. The storm outside howled against the windows, snow piling high, wind rattling like chains. Inside, the storm had a face, red and twisted, eyes darting between me and Sarah. He realized in that moment that he'd lost her too, and the look on his face as he saw the truth settle in, helpless, cornered, exposed, was the closest thing to silence I'd ever seen from my son. But silence before the fall is only the breath before impact, and I knew the final blow was still waiting. The storm broke just before dawn. Snow hammered the roof. Wind howled like wolves circling, and inside my cottage the air was thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Mark stood across from me, chest heaving. Sarah pressed to the wall as if the boards themselves might shelter her. His eyes flicked from me to the mantel. The compass glowed in the firelight, Liz's letter framed beside it. Symbols of everything he'd lost, everything he'd thrown away. "That's mine," he spat, nodding toward the letter. "All of it should have been mine." I stepped closer, steady as the frozen lake outside. "No, Mark, that was your mother's. She trusted me to protect it, from you most of all." He laughed, bitter and hollow. "You think giving it to strangers makes you noble? It makes you a fool." "Those kids aren't strangers," I said. "They're the future, and they'll carry my name with honor long after your debts swallow yours." The words hit harder than a fist. His face crumpled, fury collapsing into something uglier, fear. The realization that he had nothing left to threaten, no ground to stand on. He grabbed the compass, yanking it from the mantel. "Then I'll take this. If I can't have the money, I'll take the damn symbol." I let him hold it, the needle trembling in his shaking hands. "Funny thing about a compass," I said quietly. "It always points true, no matter who holds it, even liars, even cowards." His grip faltered. For the first time, his reflection in the glass of Liz's frame stared back at him. Not the son he thought he was, but the man he'd become. A man who shoved his father into the cold and laughed. A man who squandered everything. Sarah's voice cracked the silence. Mark, it's over. I can't do this anymore. The words landed like a gavel. Final. He turned to her, but whatever he meant to say died in his throat. He saw it in her eyes. She was gone, even if her body still stood there. And in that moment, the compass slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor, needle spinning wildly before settling north. He staggered back, shoulders sagging, eyes empty. Without another word, he shoved open the door and walked into the storm. Snow swallowed him whole, his footsteps vanishing as quickly as he made them. Silence filled the cottage, broken only by the crackle of fire. Sarah sank into a chair, tears spilling in quiet relief. I bent, picked up the compass, brushed snowflakes from its face. The needle pointed steady, true, unwavering. Liz had been right. Dignity could be lost, but it could also be rebuilt, one choice at a time. I set it back on the mantel beside her letter. My legacy wasn't a son who betrayed me. It was the children whose futures would rise brighter because of Liz's gift, because I'd chosen to protect it. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, peace settled, warm and final. And as I stood there, the fire glowing, I whispered to Liz, "Justice is done. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.